First question, what did everybody learn about whiskey last night? Any takeaways from Jonathan? Anything salient this morning? Which is the 60th chainsaw. Yeah, love it. Oh, we had the 4 C's: cordage, cover, combustion. Yeah, let's skip to the good stuff, right? Combustion. That's what we're all looking for. All right, cool. All right, so just a couple kind of housekeeping things here. So how many people have not checked out yet? Raise your hand if you have not. Okay, cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a slight schedule change. So at checkout is 11 a.m. So our break at 10:30 is going to be till 11. So we'll have a little bit extra time at our 10:30 break. You can go grab your stuff, throw it in your car, or bring it in here, and then we'll get started. So we have a keynote, panel, and a keynote. And the theme of today. Oh, wait, before I get to that. Oh, another thing. There is a swag box in the back. It's like sort of my swag graveyard. And if you want to go grave digging back there, you can find some Founders Network teas, and there's a bottle. Josh Firstos from Chicago is always asking me about swag, so I brought that especially for him, but I don't see him here. So if you can all try to get all of it before he gets here, I think that would be great. Okay, and then and I think that's it. Oh, and then Jeremy. Is Jeremy in here? Kellstrom? I just saw him at breakfast. So Jeremy's going to host a lunch after we finish up here today. It's going to be offsite. I believe there'll be some wine tasting or something like this. There's information in the functions directory on the member site about all the details there, or you can just ask Lauren or ask me or ask Megan or anybody to point you out to Jeremy. That's part of what he did on the summit committee along with John and Kevin, with providing there was a meetup, two meetups earlier in the week and then one today. Okay, cool. So the theme of summit, is growth, exploration of growth. It's in a format that really delivers on the value of FN, which is going deeper with people, building deeper relationships. Because our vision again is, anybody remember our vision? Lifelong success through peer mentorship. All right, you guys pass barely. And so what I believe is that the startups come and go, but once you do one startup, you don't want to go back. And the joke is like we're unemployable, right? Like I have this story I told Jonathan earlier, and it's true. That's why it's funny. And when I was starting FN, I was like engaged and I had to pay for the wedding, and I was getting a lot of heat to get a job. I was just finished my MBA and I was thinking I wanted to start something. And I got actually to the last round of interviews at Salesforce, which at that time was like 14, something absurd, a number of rounds. And the hiring manager looked at my resume, and then he looked at me across the table and he said, "You don't want this job. You're a startup guy." And then I started FN, and here we are today. But thankfully that guy did me a huge favor. And I think there's something about this pathway, this calling, this vocation to start companies and be creative and dare to be great that we all share. And it's got a lot of hidden costs. There's taxes sort of on your health, your wealth, your relationships. Sometimes it can be a dream, but for most people, it takes a long time to see returns. And and why is that? Well, partly is we don't know how. We know kind of where we need to go directionally, but we don't know specifically, tactically, like how do we get there? And that's why we have the forum and where we share like, hey, I'm stuck with this thing, and you can be heads down and you can fire off an email and get 2 or 3 replies and get unstuck and move on, and you're good, right? And that's really amazing. The forum's amazing for that. So there's like that tactical bucket, but every morning you wake up and there's like 100 things you have to do. And you don't know really which ones you have to do that day, and you kind of have to figure that out. And some days you're better at doing that than other days, but you always feel behind. And so when you always feel behind and it starts to wear on you, you feel stress, anxiety, and that leads to burnout. And then there's that 7-year itch I was talking about, right? And this is a thing in life, and you kind of have to be aware of it. And you're going to have these ups and downs, right? But you don't want the highs to be too high. You don't want the lows to be too low. And that's why we have community. That's why we have this kind of format of relationship building, long-term, lifelong vision. The startups will come and go, but we're on this path. We're going to do this startup. It'll probably fail, just not yours individually, but just statistically, right? And we have to recognize that. And the thing that remains are these relationships. So, the second big thing about Founders Network is not just the tactical and like not having to reinvent the wheel and be heads down and myopic, locked away in your home office or wherever it might be, but it's building these relationships, coming to events like this, to Summit, where you can get to know people, you find out where they grew up, what they're all about, find some connections, build some trust. And that's what's special about Founders Network. It's that authentic community that I haven't seen out there in other events. So I see a lot of sort of, pissing contests, or it's the big tent, like the disrupt, startup thing. And that's got its own type of value. This is a different type of value. So, so yesterday was really about startup growth. Today is about personal growth. Growth as a founder, growth as a leader, growth as a human being. It's the squishy side of it. It's the human side of it. So what does that mean? That means there's relationship with yourself. There's relationship with your team, the culture that you want to create with that team, the people that you want to out there that you want to bring onto that team. And how do you navigate that? And how do you make sure that you can manage that aspect of this journey with a long view and a sustainable view? Because it really is a marathon. So that's sort of what today is all about, growth as a founder. And I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say about that. Balance, like balance is a really important thing. This industry with, VCs kind of dominated when I first started. They were like the vaunted priesthood of Silicon Valley, and you'd make your pilgrimage to Sand Hill Road and, bow down at their amazing temples on Sand Hill Road. And the narrative was skewed, and the founder had to sleep under their desk and, work 80 hours a week, or come hell or high water. And I think thankfully, like, things are sort of rebalancing. And that's another reason that we have this community, is to try to bring founders together and a class consciousness, if you will, of labor versus capital here. And let's kind of make it work better for us together. So that's a big part of I think the personal balance, right? Because that's not accounted for. That's one of those hidden costs. So, all right, so just a few ideas there, but hope that kind of sets the stage. So with that, let's bring up our first keynote. So this is going to be more of a fireside conversation, and we're really lucky to have both of these gentlemen with us today. So David Ordahl is a lifetime member. He's chapter director for San Francisco. He's the former founder of Exavault, which he successfully exited last year. And when I first met David, he said, "I'm so glad you built this, because I wanted to build this thing." And I was telling Tyler Dickman, I don't know if you guys remember Tyler from his exit fireside a few years back. And Tyler said, "Oh no, you don't need to build that. Kevin, let me introduce you to Kevin." And then so David came in. He was our first lifetime member. So that kind of kicked off. Now we have 59 lifetime members. So that was kind of cool. And so, yeah, super eternally grateful for David. Okay. Yeah, he's involved with the fund and making that a reality. Yeah. And he's going to be talking with Aaron White, who's come all the way from Miami and has traveled very far to be here. And Aaron, I've really enjoyed getting to know you over the last couple of days, and hope we can keep you involved as well. And he's going to be talking about the role of mental health in the startup journey. So we're going to start kind of close in, the first step. So we'll start close in with Aaron, and I'll hand it over to you, David.
Cool, thank you. And Aaron, you probably need a mic there. All right, we're good. Perfect. Yeah, so I mean, I think, it doesn't sort of go without saying that this shit is hard. Both running a startup and thinking about mental health. I think most of us in this room probably are doing a startup for one of two reasons. Either number one, you want to change the world, you want to make an impact in some way, or number two, you want to make a lot of money. Sometimes people get really lucky and they get both. Sometimes people get one of the two, and oftentimes people get neither one. But no matter what outcome you have, it's a hell of a lot of work to get there, even if the outcome is neither one. And so we sort of celebrate success, but we need to sort of think about some of the costs that come with that success and try to really do a good job of balancing things, so that, you know, those costs don't end up hurting more than they should. So Aaron, you've founded several startups, but I think 2 recently have had some significant success in the conventional standpoint. I believe you've had, I think it's even up on the screen here, you've had a $200 million exit just recently from a startup you founded back in 2012. And then I can't remember the number exactly, but another 9-figure exit into getting bought by another company that's now raised $150 million in funding. So
yes, I can start with that. Hashtag blessed, super fortunate. And actually, I want to lead with the super success, because I think this is like the survivorship bias by which I've been invited here to then tell you the 90% case of all the pain I endured and was lucky enough to survive, but then consider everybody else who doesn't, right? And knowing what I know now and things I learned along the way, we'll talk about kind of that impact and how I do things differently. But starting with the highlights. So actually in 2010, we founded this company called Price Intelligently, which later rebranded as ProfitWell. And I think folks here yesterday heard me speak on this a little bit. It was, hey, we're all selling software. How do you price it? Thumb to the wind. You can do better. Turns out there's methodologies. We encoded them in a product, found a service to go with it, found an amazing CEO who just took this thing and ran with it. And 99% of credit goes to him. He's phenomenal. Patrick Campbell. I'm sure most folks probably even come across his content at some point. But we worked really hard over the years and a really successful exit happened. And that was entirely bootstrapped. We had no outside investors on that thing, primarily because it started as a services company and we added product to it over time. And services companies are kind of a thing that I think often get overlooked, but they can be quite successful. So that was awesome. And what that gave me insight into was people selling SaaS, their challenges with pricing, metrics, customer acquisition, customer retention. I saw the sell side of the market. It was awesome. I then spent a few years in venture capital looking at SaaS companies. So I got paid to get an MBA. That was kind of awesome. And then left venture capital because I just couldn't not be a founder. I mean, I think it's like your Salesforce interviewer did you such a good service because it's true. While I loved meeting smart people, I hated not doing. And I hated not having a team. It was really emotionally draining for me. That's what gets me fired up. So then I left and I took the other side of the SaaS market. How do buyers use SaaS, right? The whole world of IT is changing. Now it's not about servers and closets. It's about what cool apps that you're wiring up together to encode your processes, find leverage, and enable your company. I joke with my team today that companies are cyborgs. They're some percent human and some percent software, and the percent software is going up. So like SaaS is really important on the buy side. So Blissfully was a SaaS management company. We helped people figure out what software do you even have? We'd find it automatically, and then we'd give them insights on how to save money, how to operate more effectively, et cetera. Well, I'll talk about the challenges with that startup. I think we'll probably get to that later. If you ask me about original sin, I've got a really fun framing I want to share today. But ultimately, we were doing good, not great. And I knew the founder of this company called Vendor. His name's Ryan New, incredible visionary and salesperson. And he was helping companies save money buying SaaS software. If you were someone who bought SaaS, whether you had a procurement team or not, they could help you acquire it at fair prices really efficiently. And they just didn't have enough technology, right? They had an amazing offering, amazing value prop, huge ROI for their customers, but not a lot of tech. We had a lot of tech, but not enough kind of go-to-market traction. And so this was a once-in-a-lifetime lucky opportunity to marry those two things up. It fit like peanut butter and jelly. I think that's the exception, not the rule with M&A. And so now Blissfully is the product and technology arm for Vendor. My co-founder and I were elevated to co-founder status of Vendor, and then all of us are now building this combined business. And things are going well. We did raise a massive Series B in the middle of the summer. So these are the highlights, and I'm looking forward to talking about the lowlights.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean that's the glamour story, right?
That's the glamour story,
So from
yeah.
the outside, it looks amazing. You live in a fancy condo in Miami and all these sorts of good things, right?
Anybody comes by, well, I'll just go show it off. Yeah.
Yeah, but so I mean, we talked a little bit last night. It hasn't always been a glamour story. So I mean, take us through sort of some of the personal, the personal side things, some of the stories that you have had that are a little less glamorous as
Would love to. They get very unglamorous very quickly.
the years have gone on.
So I think everybody here has been through some sort of unglamorous phase. I want to talk about my most unglamorous phase. And before I do, I have, unsurprisingly, a type A personality, need to succeed, mind the details. My stress response is to get my hands even closer to, whatever it is that needs attention. Deep feelings of shame. And it's like a half joke, but also like, I know people here feel that, right? Like, oh man, this is me. I'm failing. It's not my startup. It's not my business. It's me. I'm the problem. So the darkest time was the following. In 2016, we started Blissfully, and then I moved to New York to be with my co-founder. He had recently moved to New York. We started remote. We're like, probably should be in the same city now. I moved to New York, and I had come from VC, and it's hard to ratchet your lifestyle down. I think people know that. I knew that intellectually, but emotionally, I couldn't do it. So I got a 1 bedroom in Manhattan. It wasn't even a very glamorous one, but 1 bedrooms in Manhattan are still really freaking expensive when you're in a seed stage startup. My then girlfriend, now wife, was working. So we're like, we'll make this work. But we were kind of living effectively hand to mouth. I had never been one to save. I always assumed I was going to make it. That assumption never left. So like 401ks, F that. That's mental noise. I'm not going to think about that. Savings, that's money I could leverage today to achieve my dreams. Why would I squirrel it away? So we're living in this 1 bedroom, and a couple of just horrible things happened back to back to back. The first one was my wife got very sick. She went to the gym one day, her heart rate pegged at 200. She was just warming up. She wasn't even working out yet. It presented like a heart attack. Rushed her to the hospital. Doctors couldn't find anything wrong. And we're sitting there going, what the hell was that? So it's a very scary week. It's like it felt like she almost died. 1 week later, the same thing happens again, this time at home, except afterwards, she begins having these massive seizures in front of me before the ambulance arrives. She's bending over backwards and ultimately blacking out because she couldn't breathe anymore. She goes to the hospital. She stays there for 3 nights, and they still didn't know what it was. They didn't want to call it a stroke. They didn't want to call it a heart attack. They have names for things that don't have names. It's not very useful to get a name for something that doesn't have a name. And the net result was when she came back home, she had these seizures 5-6 times a day until she would black out. She would throw up constantly. I would carry her to the bathroom in the middle of the night. She lost the ability to walk. She was actually in a wheelchair for 6 months. And all this is going on while I don't have a buffer. We're very far away from my parents. I've got a startup that's kind of sort of working. It looks like we could have something, but it's not obvious yet. And so I'm just going into survival mode. How do I keep my wife alive? How do I keep my life stable? How do I keep the startup alive? You can't. Like, I just could not call a spade. I just was running on, I just must achieve. There's no other option. I just must do that. And so, she starts relearning how to walk, but she cannot work. Her brain is foggy. Her muscles don't respond to her. She's still having seizures. It was tough, and we didn't have the income. So now what savings I did have, and I dabbled in crypto and things like that, were burning down, and the pandemic hits. So now everything's shutting down. The world's freaking out. I'm dealing with a startup that I'm like, oh God, sales and retention are now changing dramatically, out of fear, rightfully so. I've got this situation at home I'm trying to navigate, and my personal runway is running out. I could not make it work. I felt deep shame because I could not afford to literally move us out of this apartment into a cheaper one, because you need first and last month's rent, security deposit, and to pay for boxes at least. And I'm like, fuck, what do I do? I don't feel proud about this. I don't know there was a better answer. I said, I have tried to support the 2 of us for a 1.5 years in this, and I'm just collapsing in on myself. A lot of attention was on her, rightfully so. no one had been checking in on me, and that's understandable. I'm not blaming anybody. I should have been checking in on me, or I could have been checking in on me. She goes and lives with her parents. We become separated for what I thought would be 3 months, because I'm like, you know what? I'll figure this out. I'm like, go live with your parents 3 months. Maybe I'll come move in, maybe whatever. But our relationship was starting to take a strain. My solution was to go move into our office, which was empty. So it's a 3rd floor walk up in the Union Square area. I get an air mattress and I live under the conference table in the conference room. It frequently did not have heat in the office. It often did not have hot water. It's the same system. It had a shower, but didn't always work. And I lived on 2 tubs of Ben & Jerry's ice cream, a sleeve of Oreos, and a calzone almost every night. It's amazing. It's amazing I didn't kill myself with diabetes. Like it felt like I should have. And what I thought would be a 1 to 2 month kind of like, let me just recover mentally here for a hot second, in this kind of homeless way, became a year, because I just started running on adrenaline, momentum, and fear of anything different. And I didn't know I was suffering from deep anxiety. I didn't know that I was feeling shame. I didn't know that I could ask for help. No one was checking in on me because I was presenting really cheerfully externally, because that's part of the mystique of startups is, yeah, of course you're struggling, but this is just the way, it's like common. And that was really hard. And then one more terrible thing happened that I'll share, and then I can turn this back over. We had just geared up to do a Series A for Blissfully, and it was looking like it was going well. And I've got a lot of experience fundraising, and I could tell this one wasn't our best fundraise ever. The pandemic certainly impacted us, but we'd do something. Our investors, or then potential investors, we signed a term sheet. We were really deep into the hardest diligence I've ever done, which should have been a signal to me that something was probably off with these guys. And at the very last minute, they tried to renegotiate the deal down by like some significant valuation. And I was like, F this, right? Ended up calling vendor. It made tons of sense. I only wish we had seen this opportunity sooner. And I will say the one last thing that's I feel at least proud about is that before that happened, I had actually reconciled with my then girlfriend, moved in with her. We sorted things out. We got engaged. We're married. I'm so proud of that, because I dug myself out of this hole. She wonders why she stayed with me so long. I say it's because she's dumb. She's not. She's very smart. She's very smart, and she could see that I just needed, some serious help, but would otherwise get there. And so now there's a positive story on the other end. But I'm only sharing this because there is a positive story on the other end. And I think everybody here can see how tenuous that like threading that needle turned out to be, and how lucky it was, because I easily could have killed myself, could have ended up, ruining the best relationship of my life, and lost my business and lost my sanity and been a broke 40-year-old man with nothing to show for it, who then collapsed into shame and guilt and regret. That is like the other 99 universes. We happen to be in this one, which is why you're hearing about it. And so survivorship bias is extremely real in this industry when you're talking to successful people. And I knew it intellectually, but now I feel it actually. And so I don't know how to convey that to folks, but like, you have to take care of yourself along the way, because no one else will, because you are probably a good salesperson and can hide it really well, or you may not even be in touch with your own suffering. So.
Yeah, no, indeed. Quick housekeeping. John, would you be kind enough to go close that door so we can not listen to the vacuum? So yeah, I mean, how did you hide it? I mean, you obviously did, and you had a team that you were.
They didn't even know I was living in the office.
Yeah, I mean, how'd you hide it?
I think I had just gotten. I think it's the sales personality, right? I think you can kind of sell and spin anything, right? So. The team didn't know I was living in the office. Certainly my then girlfriend did, but she didn't, she knew I was broken and was trying to tell me this actively, and I just couldn't hear it. And I can give other instances in hindsight of where people were trying to tell me things. Aaron, you're an anxious person. No. So she knew it, but my family, they're broken in their own ways. Like I love them, but they weren't checking in on me in that way. My friends were like, Aaron's just being weird and wacky. He's always been like that. And because I was presenting cheerfully externally, it's hard to tell when someone's sort of deeply, depressed or dysfunctional on the inside. But I think that's just the real risk. And I think if you looked at the situation objectively, and this is what actually got me out of it, was I was like, what would I tell my brother if he were in this situation? You know, you're broke, you're living on an air mattress in an office. Mice were parkouring off me in the middle of the night. What would I tell him? I'm like, dude, you need help. Let's fix this. But I didn't think that for myself. And that was like the beginning of the unraveling for me, where I could start to see the situation for what it was. But I was really good at spinning it for everybody else. And that was net negative.
Yeah, no, that's very understandable. I mean, I think that's something that, you know, a lot of us go through, right? Is that, I mean, I'm not going to ask everybody to raise their hand, but I want to ask how many people here feel that they've had mental health challenges. All right. So look around, guys. It's, you know, I mean, you know, and I have too. I mean, absolutely. I have too. Right. And it's this, there's sort of this pressure to spin it, to keep going. So tell us a little bit more, Aaron, about, you know, how that, you called it an unraveling, how that kind of came to, like, you know, because people get in these states, and I've been in this state too, right? And like, how do you fucking snap out of it?
Yeah, I think there are formulas. I'll suggest some that are legal, but not in all states. I'll actually back up a little bit. I was interim CTO for a meditation company called 10% Happier years ago. And the founder of that company and I are very close friends. Ben Rubin, he's very centered, very great guy. And as a thank you gift for helping them rebuild their technology back then, he gave me a 3-day silent retreat gift. Go to this, compound and don't talk or speak or listen or do anything for 3 days. And I lasted less than 24 hours before I had like a freak out of just, yeah, it was too much. Like nothing was too much, which is weird. He's like, well, you're a very anxious person. That doesn't surprise me. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm not anxious. That's not true. But it stuck with me because he's one of the more centered people I've ever known, who's navigated his own personal problems, not always perfectly, but very well. And so I was like, oh, damn, there's some truth in that. So that was always kind of somewhere deep in the back of my head. There was a session with a few friends where I may have tried a psychoactive substance, that the Beatles might have sung about. And that was enough to kick me 15 degrees off center. I wasn't a deep thing. I wasn't talking to God or anything like that. But I remember asking folks, I'm like, hey, do you guys have that voice in your head that says you're doing this wrong and this sucks and you're not putting in enough effort and it's just not working and you got to try harder because you're not going to make it? And they're like, sometimes, but not all the time. And I'm like, no, not all the time. Are you serious? I'm like, it is literally all the time for me. And that was oh God, that's what Ben was talking about. That's anxiety. I didn't have a name for it. And then I'm like, I don't even know when I'm sick to my stomach. Now I've got a name for that too. I was so out of touch with my body and how I was feeling. I could not name illness, anxiety, depression. I just couldn't connect on that level. I was so just, intellectual, must go, shame driven, go. And so that started me seeing it. Then I engaged with therapy, which was awesome. It's like, men would rather sleep in an office with mice jumping off the middle of the night, than go to therapy. Like, yeah. But then I started going and it was actually really great. Started having open conversations with my partner, and she and I could talk about things on a level that, I could kind of like intellectually talk about with her, but not emotionally. And we kind of found a whole new depth. And I don't want to pretend like we didn't have some degrees of that, but about the issues I was struggling with, we definitely did not. And so then it was just a lot of those kind of things, talking, introspection, naming things for what they were. I got much better at meditation. It became much more useful. Even I knew it could work, but I wasn't applying it correctly. And it took a year from first noticing this to actually unraveling it. And I'm not going to claim that I'm free of anxiety or anything like that now. Like, there's no voice in my head saying I'm fucking up this right now. There would have been. I feel good right now. That voice still creeps up all the time, but now I know and I can name it. And I'm like, oh, that's anxiety. Like, let me breathe deep or go take a walk because I can make that go away and I can then prioritize and go.
Yeah. So I'm curious. I mean, how are things now? Right. I mean, you started to talk about it, but I mean, give us one more level of detail. Like, what do you still struggle with?
Yeah. I have always struggled with insomnia, and that was anxiety driven. And now when I'm anxious, I know it's going to lead to bad sleep. So I can actually detach from things and start addressing it. And so I've invested heavily in, sleep and closing things down or naming things or talking about it or writing stuff down to get out of my head. Things I know folks do, but I know to turn to the tools in a deliberate way now that I didn't know before. but I still have sleepless nights. I still collapse in on myself occasionally and just kind of become paralyzed by the stress of things. But just being able to name it is so useful because the impact is shortened. I can see that it will end, and I don't fall prey to the impulses to do things that are self-destructive, like eating, 5,000 calories in one sitting, or, being mean to people because I happen to come. Like, it's much better these days. But it did take a while.
Yeah. And out of curiosity, how much have you shared with your team? I mean, because there is this sort of challenge that, like, even today, you're still supposed to be the, charismatic leader, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't look good to know that the charismatic leader is, about to break down.
Well, we're recording the live stream, so it's, it's the cat's out of the bag.
Enough.
I actually learned a great technique here, and I think I've always been pretty good about being empathetic with people and telegraphing on a private basis with folks some of this, but not to the same depth. But actually now what I do in conversations with my team is I lead with my fears and my anxieties. And I actually think it's a really effective leadership technique. And it's not like you're not mind, screwing people or psycho abusing them. It's just like, hey, if we're going down this path, I have to let you know, I feel these things. I feel fear about this. I feel anxiety about this. I'm not saying this has to dictate what we're going to do, but I lead with that stuff. It gets it off my chest. They understand it's okay to have fears and anxieties. We put them in there, and then we work through the pragmatic issues together. That's awesome. Ironically, I was really good at telling people to take vacations over the years. I'm like, oh, you're going to burn out. You need to take a vacation. They're like, Aaron, you haven't taken one in 7 years. I'm like, hey, don't worry about me. That's okay. You can hide the stuff really well. You can actually be a good leader knowing what to do and yet not doing it yourself and feeling it deeply yourself. I constantly would encourage people to take vacations, and yet literally did not take one for 7 years.
Yeah. No, that's, I actually was a little better about that. I did take a good number of vacations when I was, when I was running the company. But no, but I mean, it is hard. I mean, I also would share fears and things like that with my team. But even to this, it can be a little weird, right? You're sharing something that could affect the company with somebody that works for you. What are they going to think? Are they going to panic and think that things are going to go badly and maybe leave or something like that? It's challenging to do.
One thought on that, like, I think you should do it. I think it's the thing we all should do. One thing we did well from a business perspective is always share the numbers transparently with the entire team. The board decks everything. Obviously, you're going to redact some stuff, but by and large, the health of the business was shared and communicated constantly. I think it gets even better when you as a founder can share some of those emotions with your team. And I think in startups, a lot of the stuff is shooting the moon in some way, meaning you have to do the thing that seems counterintuitive, because if you do it right, you end up getting the undue unexpected leverage. If you're sharing stuff with team and they're freaking out about it, they might not be the right people. The right people actually are like, damn, I was thinking that too. I'm so glad we're talking about this. Let's solve it. Awesome. If you hear, damn, that's scary, I got to peace out, you kind of want to know, because that's not a unique situation. That's going to keep coming up no matter how big the company gets. You're always going to have some existential threat, I believe. So, it's scary to do it, but it also feels like if you can do it and you build a culture that wants it and can leverage it to greater effect, that's the kind of elevated form.
The ultimate state. Yeah. Well, I'm going to open it up for questions here in a second, but one more question. You talked about team. What about family and your wife specifically? I mean, how
I
did
listened to her so much more than ever before. Fair enough. What a fucking genius. That was really dumb to stick with me. She's just, she's just really brilliant. And, I think she saw through the matrix a little bit for, how deep our relationship got through all of our struggles was, I think, a good kind of the fuel to have her help me through my struggles. I don't think I was necessarily the best partner up to that point, but when crisis hit for her, I kind of, up until I hit my own breaking point, helped as much as I could. And I think that really deepened our relationship. But there, I actually think I don't have necessarily great advice, because, I looking back on it, I could have done it so much better if I had just bothered to take a beat and name things for what they were. The only other two things I want to sneak in before Q&A, just some truisms. We were talking about a few things last night.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned imposter syndrome.
Yep.
Which I'm sure no one here has experienced. It's like, you were like, I don't know if I'm a real entrepreneur, right? I don't know if I'm a real CTO. I don't know if I'm a real entrepreneur. There's no such thing as a real anything, right? It's like the no true Scotsman fallacy. Like you are. You say you are, you are. Get it. Don't worry about it. That's a meaningless thing. If your head's saying that to you, that thing's anxiety. Work to shut it up, or at least listen to it and then let it go as a child in your head telling you something because it's fearful. Cool. I hear you. You're afraid. Move on. And then the second thing is, if I can popularize this quote, adulthood is an illusion only children can see. I often thought there was always someone that had the answers and was smarter than I was, and they were out there and they would know what to do. That person does not exist. They don't exist. They're not on your board. They're not your advisor. They're not your co-founder. They're not your partner. They're not you. No one actually has the answers. We're all making it up as we go along. I know you've heard that. But if you feel like you're looking for the adult in the room, you will never find one. And the sooner you realize that, the better. Because that was also part of the shame dynamic for me, which is like, I'm not the adult in the room and I need to be. I better go find one. And it's like, well, actually.
Well, and that's, I mean, that's the core of imposter syndrome too, right? Is that you think that somebody else out there is really doing it. They really know what they're doing and they really know how to do it. And you don't. And you're the dumbass that's like just trying to figure it out. Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, that's absolutely true. I mean, everybody else.
You'll be a dumbass no matter what
dumbass
anyway.
too.
So it's fine.
All right, questions, guys. Let's go, John, go ahead.
That was a challenging one because there were three of us that started the business originally: Christopher O'Donnell, myself. Christopher would go on to be the chief product officer at HubSpot. Very smart person. We happened to meet in high school and then reconnect 10 years later. Like, what are the odds? And then Patrick Campbell, who was CEO. And then later we'd pull in a buddy, Facundo, who was CPO for that opportunity. It's just tough. You got a lot of different personalities, a lot of different relationships. It was a weird one in which we had sort of started the business, built the technology, found initial customers, guided on some level. I also think we oversold him on how much we'd be able to do for him. And he was probably overthinking how much we'd be able to do for him. So that relationship dynamic was not great. It got a lot better over time because you're kind of married through the legal structure. So if you don't sort it out, terrible things happen. So we got to a good place in the end, but I don't want to claim that, like I think if he calls in otherwise, like, I think we're really good friends still. All signs indicate yes, but it took a lot of work to get there and it was not straightforward. My co-founder at Blissfully, it's actually the second company we built together. The first company was an ed tech company. And 2 years in, he asked me to leave because it turned out tech wasn't the lever. We couldn't move the needle with it. And he saw me as ineffectual. And I left because the CEO asked me to, but he was also my best friend at the time. And that caused a rift in our relationship for at least a year. And yet I was still on the board, still had to work with the company. And we eventually repaired and got back together to work on the next startup together. So like these relationship problems are very real and dynamic and have major highs and major lows. So I'm just sharing the complications, no deep insight other than that. I've needed that. I mean, hindsight's 2020, but I absolutely needed that. And he did that for me in certain regards, not all regards, CTO living in the office, it's fine. But he also knew I was saying I'm fine. So it's not on him for that. That was on me. I need that personally. I don't think everybody does. Like if you have a particularly strong relationship with your partner, that may be the thing for you. If you've got a really strong group of friends or advisors, that may be the thing for you. I have needed that historically. And I do think that startups are team more than anything else. A good idea and a good process and good traction will never trump good team, because the good team is what solves problems and keeps people kind of aligned and emotionally stable. So it depends on the person, but I have needed that in my career.
Yeah, I'll actually jump in on that one. I mean, I go back and forth on that a lot, right? I was solo founder for this last round, and I don't officially know if there's gonna be another round, but likely. And yeah, and I mean, I go back and forth. I mean, do I want to do it again solo, or do I want to, find a co-founder? And there's very attractive pieces to both. So other questions, Nadeem? I think you had one.
That was the wake up moment for you. Yeah. I love that you just shared that. I mean, that's actually makes me feel better because I have not heard that either. So like, yeah, thank you. Oh, same. Yeah. I had to pretend with the downstairs office neighbors that I was a workaholic, which I was, but like the workaholic who didn't live at the office just happened to always be there.
Just always there. Yeah. I think we had Megan, you had a question, I think.
Ooh, that's a good one. I'd love to hear other folks' thoughts on that too, because I know that my response was not healthy for years and years and years on that one. So the question was, when you feel like the world's burning down, you know, what is your go-to response? For me, it's always been sort of like an essentialism of like, let me just take stock of the thing that absolutely cannot fail and focus on that. I don't think that's the wrong thing, but you can only do that if you have a sustainable framework underneath it. And I ignored that part. It is unsustainable to be broke, living on a mattress, you know, in an office, self-medicating through calories and pretending like everything's fine. That is not sustainable. That will injure you. And so you have to take stock of what's truly essential, but you need to realize that you can there's a candle underneath that you can burn, and it kind of works sometimes. But that's I think it's hard for entrepreneurs to see that as a last resort, to let that candle burn. It often becomes the first resort. And that's like, I flipped my framing on that. You know, working out, it's now a non-negotiable. I will not schedule that meeting. You know, going to sleep and detaching at the end of the day. Yeah, you know what? I didn't return that call. I didn't return that email. I didn't do that thing I said I was going to do. Mea culpa. I'll apologize for it tomorrow. It's not great, but I'm human. So then I will go to sleep. You know, those are things that have helped.
Yeah, Jags, I think you're next.
Here's the perfected 3-step process. Number one, we talk about it. So we're doing that today. So this is like on some small. So the question was, how can we as founders, you know, actually actionably improve our mental health? So number one, talk about it. Get it out there. Talk about mental health issues. I actually am really excited for the next generation. If anybody's spent even any time delving into TikTok, I'm sorry, because it can get very addictive very quickly. But I found Therapy Talk, which is a whole like little subset of TikTok. And I'm like, oh my God, there are kids like smarter than any therapist I've ever talked to telling me these like framings and concepts on how to think about various dysfunctions and work through them and childhood traumas and all this. And I'm like, this is incredible. That's free. So there's definitely the content out there is bubbling up. And so if we talk about it, you'll find your way to it. That's one. There are certain tools like meditation, and obviously I'm a fan of 10% Happier. I'm biased in that. So I think there's a lot of good content in there, and that actually was very helpful for me. Not the first time I was exposed to it. It's after I had sort of like an increasing traction of self-reflection that it became even more useful. And I know there's entrepreneurs in this room. Portia, you're working on a mental health, a startup, was Optimized Brain. So like, that's awesome. So I think talk about it, find tools, however it is, whether it's an app or, content. And then there are entrepreneurs tackling it systematically. Christopher O'Donnell went on, the founder of ProfitWell with me, and Patrick went on to, he's working at Thrive now with Ariana Huffington. It's all about employee benefits. And one of the big things there is mental health. Why? Because he cares a lot about that in this next chapter of his career. Awesome. That's so cool. So there's no perfected answer, but that's just kind of, it's nice to see that this first thing, I think, is it's coming up. It didn't used to, or at least not as often.
Well, I'm going to wrap us up here. Unfortunately, we are just about out of time. Kevin's giving me the evil eye there, but I want to wrap us up here with just a couple of other notes on resources. And so first off, I mean, I'm going to start with the deepest, darkest one, but it's important everybody knows about it. Suicide is a real thing. You made an allusion to it. Statistically, 4 people in this room have considered suicide, according to our national stats. There's a new number, a new emergency line for suicide, 988. So it's kind of like 911. I went live about 2 months ago, 988, and it'll connect you to the National Suicide Hotline, where they can then further connect you with resources. So they want you to call either if you're personally thinking about it, or if you know somebody that might be, or you suspect that somebody might be, right? You're seeing signs, you're not sure if the signs are real or not. I wish to God I'd been here 20 years ago. I actually lost a friend 20 years ago to suicide. So
Thank you for sharing that resource. That's awesome.
So 988. And then, therapy is a pretty good thing too. You mentioned it. A lot of us have been. It's not that hard to find a therapist. In fact, how did you find yours? I'm curious.
I actually, oddly enough, I sat down at a unconference in Boston when I was in venture, and the then CEO of Talkspace, before the company had gotten started, pitched me his idea, and I'm like, that sounds incredible. My firm didn't want to do it, but it was amazing. That whole thing grew. So I just always knew that, like, you need someone, sign up for Talkspace, you can get a therapist. And that's how I did it. And it doesn't matter how you find your way to one, but there are things online. And then if you want to do someone in person that's more meaningful, go for it. Like, anything is better than nothing.
Yeah. So Talkspace, you can go on Yelp, you can go on Nextdoor. There's a lot of places where you can get recommendations to a therapist. My one recommendation for finding a therapist is go and interview them first. And just have a conversation, maybe sort of start therapy for 1 or 2 sessions, but don't necessarily feel bound to the first therapist you go to. It's just like anything else. You're going to click with certain people more than others, right? And so the odds that you perfectly click with the very first person you talk to, maybe not terribly high. So it's not bad. You pay per session typically. It's not bad to go and interview others. So that's therapy. And then I think the last item, which you also alluded to, but look for the support of your peers. If you're not in one, you could start a small group, 4 or 5 people that are other founders, and you get together and talk about your businesses every month. I think we have a few of those in the network here that happen. But it really can be helpful to just once a month, sit down with other founders and be like, shit, this happened this month. And it's really helpful. So
that is awesome. Yeah. Have a group, right, that can understand the way you do, but you also talk frankly about the emotional impact and the stress of it, not just the posturing.
Yeah. So that's it for today. Kevin, back to you. But Aaron, thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks.